Welcome back to the Old Fly Guy Network, where we engage with those in general aviation, making the skies safer and more enjoyable for all of us. And thank you for continuing to follow us on our journey across the country to meet exciting aviators. I'm Wade, the Old Fly Guy. And today we're at Hicks Field in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, visiting with Brian Schiff of the SCHIFF Show and a number of other aviation podcasts. Welcome to the network, Brian, and thanks for joining us in your airspace.
Thank you. Glad to be here and humbled that you would even consider coming to talk to me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I've enjoyed catching up and getting ready for all this. Brian is an aviation enthusiast. He is a commercial aviator. He's a trainer. He participates in numerous industry aviation associations, and he's also a podcast host on several platforms, including the SCHIFF Show, and we're going to hear about that here a little bit later. So I know we're going to have plenty to talk about in not only aviation, but Brian's journey in aviation and how he got here. So to get started, Brian, how about we're at Hicks Field. We're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I don't know for sure how this plays into your journey. Where did you start? Is this hometown? How does this all fit?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The whole story, how, your story turns out and where you end up, it's interesting. So, no, I've been here in the DFW area for about 3.5 years. I guess it's almost 4 years at this point. But if I would have grown up, it would have been in Southern California.
Okay.
But I didn't. I failed to.
Or didn't grow up? I
didn't grow up.
Okay.
No, never have. Don't really want to at this point. It looks overrated.
Okay.
But no, I grew up in Southern California, and I went to college at San Jose State University. And I dropped out of college to take the elusive airline job and go to the big show at age 21.
Okay.
And that was with TWA, with Trans World Airlines, and they were bought by American Airlines. So when TWA hired me, I moved to St. Louis, lived there for 23 years, met my wife, got married, raised our children there. And then when American bought and merged with TWA, they closed the base eventually. And, as that is, I didn't want to commute. Long story short, here I am in DFW, the mothership for American Airlines.
Okay. So that's how we got, you've been here 3 years. So we went from California to St. Louis, was it? And now we're in Dallas-Fort Worth.
That's right. There were a couple of stints back to California, then back here, but those are smaller ancillary stories.
So I'm always interested too in how, you talked about getting into the big leagues, but how did aviation start with you? Where was that spark? Where was that dream? And how did you get to the point of you were flying solo?
Well, the obvious answer is, and most people know that my father, Brian Schiff, is pretty well known and renowned in aviation, and I didn't really realize that when I was young, but he was doing it. I wanted to get into cinematography as a kid. I wanted to make movies or I just enjoyed the fact that when I made slideshows for the talent show in elementary and middle school, back then it was a reel-to-reel. We didn't have computers that we could do easy stuff with now. That I could take a audience and I could, just with the right picture and the right music, I could change their mood.
Okay.
And I'd have people in tears 1 minute and laughing the next. I thought that was really cool to have that effect on people. And I was all set to go to the George Lucas School of Cinematography. And then one day when I was 11 years old, we went to LAX to pick up my dad from work. And we stopped at the In-N-Out Burger there near LAX to wait for him to land. And a thundering, roaring 747 came overhead. And my stepmother pointed up and said, "There's your dad now. He's flying that airplane." Well, for an 11-year-old boy, looking up and having someone tell you your dad is flying that airplane, that turned the whole page for me.
Okay.
I'm like, wow, I got to do that. And it took me 3 years from that point to muster the courage to ask my dad, what do I need to do what you do? And he, excuse me, he took me to the garage, opened up a cabinet, pulled out a box, got the dust off it, and it was one that he'd been saving if I had ever asked him that question. And had a plotter, a sectional, and all the stuff that you'd need for learning to fly, a logbook. And he never once indicated that he wanted me to do it. And he said he wanted me learning to fly because I wanted to, not because I could. Mm-hmm. And for that very reason, he also charged me. He didn't charge me for his flight instruction, but I had to pay. I had to rent the airplane.
Right.
So from age 14, I was paying for that share of it. And he taught me the value of money. I had to go get a job, and if I didn't have money, we didn't fly.
There's a lot of life lessons there in that. Was he ever your instructor per se, or was he
Yes,
more your coach?
both. He was my mentor and my instructor. He taught me how to fly. So he gave me my private, my commercial, my instrument. I went to somebody else for my CFI, but he did my double I, my instrument instructor, and my multi-engine as well. So he was my instructor all the way. And I tell you, I didn't appreciate back then the instructor that I had teaching me to fly, and just targeting and aiming to be like him, and even falling short, you're going to be a good pilot.
I've heard you're very fortunate, and I know
Yes.
I know just in some of our planning, I heard it in your voice. I just heard it in your voice again, how important that was to you, and something that is will never be replaced. I always wonder what it'd be like. My dad was not an aviator, but I always wondered, I did a lot of things under his supervision. I was
Yeah.
wondering what it would be like to have your dad as a trainer,
Well, there
and
were
how that relationship works out.
a lot of it was fun. There were some very uncomfortable dinners,
Okay.
after a flying lesson when,
Right.
he'd yell at me. He was not an easy instructor. He was very tough on me. I think he held me to a higher standard. He may have cared a little bit more, or
He
whatever.
expected that.
He did, and it was very evident that it mattered to him how well that I did. So there were some uncomfortable times. There were times, when, and he often jokes about, rolling up a sectional and whacking me on the back of the head, because he sat behind me in an airplane just like this, is what he taught me to fly in. And yeah, the dynamic was interesting, but we are very close today, and we were back then. I think we always have been, that bond of aviation, which does it with all of us.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, Barry, I hope you get a chance to watch this. I'm hoping we get a chance to talk to you as well at some point in our journey here, because Brian couldn't say enough good things about your support of him. So thanks for helping him, and I know he appreciates that.
One quick thing I want to add to that is I have a lot of respect for those who didn't have a mentor living under the same roof. That had to be terribly difficult, and I can't even imagine how to get into aviation. So when someone didn't have a family member to get them into it, and they had to do it all on their own, they had a lot harder bike to pedal than I did.
Yeah, I want you to keep that thought here a little bit later, because I want to ask you something else about your dad here. But I want you to leverage that a little bit and talk about how that plays into people getting into general aviation, how that influenced you, and because you being the trainer that you are, you see a lot of people getting in there, and I want to talk about that, because part of our message here is how do we get people excited, see what you're doing, like that plane you saw fly overhead, what you've done and how have you taken your career.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else will light that same spark.
Yeah, and I'd like to encourage anybody who flies airplanes, or anybody watching this, if you have that opportunity to have an influence on, younger people or other people who may not know anything about it. It looks so distant to some people, like that's never something I could do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started, when I had the opportunity to start giving back, I would go speak at high schools, and I would talk to high school or middle school kids, and I would talk to them about like career day type thing. My kids' schools, I started there. Or I'd even go to kindergarten and tell them,
Mm-hmm.
I'd have a talk that I do for young children to tell them about what I do as a pilot. And that was very influential, and I've done that. I've done career shows for colleges, junior colleges, but the high school one very impactful one was when I did one, and years later I had a kid, I'm on his jump seat, and he's a regional airline pilot, but he was at one of my things. He says, "You're Brian Schiff." I said, "Yeah." He goes, I was at that career fair, and you're the reason I'm here today. And that's all it took. That's the reward.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You may not get everyone, but you get one like that, and all of a sudden you kind of remember a little bit of that blood, sweat, and tears you put into it.
Yeah.
And that must be powerful.
Well, you touch everybody downstream from there, because he may do it also.
That's right.
And he may reach two people, and they told two people, and they told, so everybody that you reach for two messages. One, get into aviation. So I do a lot with the 99s as well, trying to get more girls to realize, hey, you can do this too. You don't have to be a seamstress. You can be a pilot. You don't have to be a flight attendant. You can be a pilot.
Right.
You can do it just as well, if not better, than the guys who are doing it. So I would go talk to them and basically spread that word.
Very powerful. Thank you. back to the little bit of the commercial. I know you told me a story I want to make sure we capture here, back to the relationship. I know some of the pictures I've seen, and we're going to share those on the video, so you'll be seeing those. But you have pictures, I think, flying with your dad, even at the commercial stage, correct? And,
Yes.
And you were telling a story about a picture of you sitting as a toddler and in a plane that you flew later.
Yeah, that was very interesting. So I have flown with my father, first of all, when I was, I think, it was 1991. So I can't do the math, but I was still pretty new at the airline. Been there a couple years, and I was based in New York. And because of the Gulf War and everything going on then, Dad was based in New York on the L-1011. And so I said, I'm going to get on the L-1011. I started on the 727.
Okay.
And so I got on the L-1011, and my international line check, you get to pick where you're going to go and when you're going to go. So I got to do it with him on his trip. I was the flight engineer on a flight from JFK to Brussels and then Berlin. And that was a great trip. That was the first time we'd flown together on a commercial airliner. And I think he wrote an article about that. I know he wrote an article about that. I think it was called Sentimental Journey. It's on my website. It's on his. It's a fantastic, neat story if you want to hear more about that.
We'll make sure we get that posted up too.
Yeah. So the aircraft that I sat in, I took my line check in a Boeing 727 when I upgraded to captain, and when I was a toddler, maybe 1 year old or so, sitting in the cockpit of that very same airplane, and my dad looked at his logbook and saw that, yeah, that's this N number, and I looked at it, I said, that's the N number I took my captain check ride in. That was like 28 years later, that I was sitting in that airplane just on Bring Your Kid to Work Day when my dad had me sitting up there,
holding the throttle. I saw you ready to go full throttle there. So that was very the relationship with the family, and I always find that success is driven. A good part of it, people that are successful are driven that way because of strong family relationships. And
I agree.
And your father and your. Do you have any brothers or sisters that are in aviation?
I have a brother, and he got into aviation as well. In fact, I taught him to fly.
Okay, you passed it down.
I did. I passed it.
Were you hard on him?
It was a lateral. I was very hard on him, and he became a very good pilot. He ended up flying for a regional airline in St. Louis, Trans-States, and then Air Wisconsin, and it was a really bad time. 9/11 happened, and the industry just went so stagnant that he escaped the industry at that point.
Okay.
Started doing some things for himself, but he did get to fly. And then fast forward several years, I never asked my kids. I had kid one. If you took my wife and me and added up our brains, you wouldn't even equal how smart he is. So he's a computer programmer, and my daughter. And then the third child, he's the one who wanted to learn to fly.
Okay.
And so I taught him to fly. In a Citabria, I bought this airplane to teach him to fly, and he's still working his way up the ranks now.
Once again, I'm going to reflect on what you reflected on. Your son who gets a chance to watch this or hear this is that I always kind of have to look at the camera and say you're a lucky guy, because just as your dad was talking about, Brian here was talking about, he kind of struggles because he doesn't know what it's like not to have a mentor or a coach or somebody that knows the business, that is one step ahead of the plane and ahead of you, getting helping you along.
Yeah, I took that for granted. I think my son takes it for granted that there's an instant you can just walk to the other room and ask a question. And having the mentor to really drive him into the right direction. I never pushed him. I want him doing it again also because he wants to do it. He's a very good pilot, probably a better stick than I am.
Well, that's really nice.
I will say it's been tough for him, and I want to acknowledge this in case he does watch this.
Yeah, well, I hope he does watch it.
He'll watch it, and I know that it's difficult when you're following in footsteps, and two sets of footsteps, really. Mm-hmm. It's the pressure that's on him to try to be like Dad, to be like Grandpa. And I think that's got to be terribly tough, and worrying about falling short is probably causes a lot of stress. And anybody doing so, I would like to encourage not to try to compare yourself to anybody else. You're competing with yourself. You're competing with aviation, and it's you in the airplane.
That's probably some pretty sage wisdom there, because I would imagine 9 times out of 10, I know probably personally myself, I would do the same thing. As you're comparing that, and it kind of, someone told me a story the other day that it sort of takes away from your bandwidth to focus on what you should be when you're letting those like distractions, I guess,
absolutely
tear you down.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
With the, let's see, I'd like to kind of talk from the commercial side. I know you're an instructor. What's that bandwidth, and how does that play a part in your life, the instruction side? And not to tip you off, but you talked about even maybe exploring some DPE activity?
Sure. I'd had my application in to be a DPE for a long time. In fact, I was chosen to be a DPE back when I was 21. I was about to go to the school, be trained to be one when the airline hired me. And I dropped that. I dropped out of college, and I went right to the big show. I was very fortunate. Now, I worked my tail off all through college. The mistake that was made back then was that someone told me I only needed a 2.0 GPA to graduate. And I thought, okay, so anything above that is time I could be flying. Anytime spent getting.
So there was a bar in that. Okay.
I set the bar for school grades really low.
Okay.
And I spent so much time flying, day and night, and I figure I'll sleep later. And I'm not proud of that. I did poor. You guys need to do good in school, do
Right.
well.
Yeah.
And but
Life lesson there.
yeah, but I did get really far. So when I got my interview at the airline, they said, "I see your grades aren't that good," and I said, "No, I can account for that time. It wasn't partying and screwing around. I was flying the whole time, and clearly my logbook showed. I think I had 2,600 hours at age 21 when I was hired."
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the commercial part of that, you said the GA versus commercial. GA is in my heart. And when I stand up to speak somewhere or I give a webinar, most people have heard me say that I am a flight instructor. I'm an educator. A GA pilot is where my heart and soul is. And on the side, I have this little airline gig that pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And that really is how I look at it.
And what I like, and you're not alone. I got to tell you, the people that I have the pleasure of speaking with, I would say more times than not, say just that they start here, they learn the skill set here, they apply it in that business world, that commercial world, and then they figure out how to get back to this.
That's right. Yeah, and I teach a Rusty Pilot seminar, or a Back to Your Roots for AOPA. And Back to Your Roots is pilots who've gone commercial or flown for a living professionally, and now they're retiring and want to get back into general aviation. So that's a Back to Your Roots program that's fantastic for getting back into it.
And so you do some flight training here.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the AOPA. And I know, just speaking with you, and I want to also a quick shout out. One of the reasons, Brian, that I'm doing this program, Old Fly Guy Network right here, is folks like yourself. And I want to just take a moment to thank you for your energy that you've put into so many of the different programs where I know that after we talked, you're doing that as a mechanism to give back, pay it forward, and help other young aviators get involved with the business. So I felt like I sort of knew you before we met because I've seen a lot of your stuff, whether it was Foreflight that was essential in my learning. I watched a lot of it, and some of the other stuff you're doing, and I know we're going to talk about some other things, but I want to say thank you for everything you've done.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoy it, and it's that thanks. That's why I do it. Like my dad said, you learn, you earn, and you return. Those are the three phases, and I'm in the return phase. Although I am still learning. I learn every day. Students help me learn when I do webinars, podcasts, or even seminars in person. People ask questions that cause me to learn.
Yeah, but we're in a learning business. If you stop learning, you're probably in trouble.
That's true.
But back to what I was saying there, you're involved with a number of different organizations. What are some of the things that you're involved with?
So I mentioned the AOPA. I do some seminars for them, the Rusty Pilots, and I do the Back to Your Roots seminars as well. Travel all over the country to do the Rusty Pilots. I had the Foreflight workshops. I started out as an FAA safety team rep, or back then I think they called it air safety counselor back a long time ago, where you're just a volunteer helping the FAA talk to GA pilots.
Okay.
And maybe educate them, maybe give them, if they did something wrong, remedial training. Now it's the FAA safety team. So I became a representative, and I did a lot of in-person seminars.
Okay.
A lot of in-person seminars, and there'd be 30 to 50 people come and talk, and I really enjoyed that because it was interactive. I would feed off of the audience, and I applied to be a DPE at that point later, and I had my application in for a long time, and I had a DPE. I had a Fed tell me that, what you're doing is so wonderful that you do a DPE, you reach one person at a time. Where if you do webinars now, you're going to really reach a lot of people. The idea is, they want to promote safety. That's the FAA's job, to make aviation safer. And us, we as volunteers in the FAA safety team, we're their representatives to do that. From everything between, let's say a pilot makes an accidental gear up landing. They're not going to violate them now. The FAA has this compliance program where instead of just whipping you, we're going to say, all right, look, let's get some training to bring you back up to compliance. So the FAA safety team representatives would do that. So I've had several, pilots that the FAA's given me for remedial training, or let's see if you can do 50 patterns without, forgetting to put the gear down,
right,
or something like that. I do tailwheel endorsements. I do flight reviews and instrument proficiency checks, or advanced training on other things. Really do enjoy that. But then COVID happened, and that's when I got into webinars because it was almost required. And I don't, I sit there in my room with a really nice shirt and a pair of boxers watching the camera. Like,
he's wearing full shorts today.
I am. I'm
okay.
dressed.
Okay.
But I just watch, I don't know who's there, and I look at the count, and there's, 2,800 people who are watching this, but all I see is a camera, and it's quiet, no reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I say something I think is funny, dead silent. And it seems like a tough crowd. I don't really, but we got these little emojis now that people can float, and I think that's fun because it gives me some feedback.
Give you some feedback.
Exactly. So I've been doing a lot of that, and one of these seminars that I did was a Foreflight seminar, a class on how to use Foreflight. And it was a several hour weekend course. And I realized that I did a couple of these and noticed that if I have a syllabus, I couldn't stick to it because everybody in the audience is asking questions.
Right.
And they have their things that they want to know. And that's fair. So I answer their questions. And then we move on, and I'm trying to get to my syllabus. Another question. Okay, yeah, so blah, blah, blah. And what I learned is I can't follow a syllabus when I teach Foreflight. So what I said is, let's have a Foreflight workshop. So we're going to plan a flight from A to B.
Right.
You look at it at home. When you come in for the seminar, we're going to just plan this flight. We'll start planning it. We'll see what issues come up and what questions you have. I had no syllabus. It was the most fantastic and successful thing you could imagine. People loved it. They got a lot from it. They got their questions answered. The content was really driven by them. And we had some people that knew the answers and I didn't. So we had also people helping answer questions. It was fantastic. So come COVID, I decided to take that online with the Foreflight workshops that I started. We did one a month, and we did 19 episodes, and they're workshops still because I'd have people in the background feeding the questions that were coming to me. I had no idea there'd be thousands of people asking questions. So it was tough, but it was fun.
And I remember those. What I liked about that actually was, just to your point, it was real. We're going from, I can't remember the one we went, someplace southeast of Lake Michigan up to, you were pretending we were going to go up to the Oshkosh or something like that.
Yeah, we got a big lake in the middle, right?
Exactly. And so we weren't going to fly across the lake, and we were going to fly down, and we had all the airspace we had to navigate. And I liked, there was just a lot of real-time features that you explored, that it wasn't like I wanted one thing. By the time, if you stuck with it for that time period, you pick up a lot of a lot of things.
Yeah, and I didn't
know.
Like
you said, you probably learned a few things yourself.
Absolutely. And sometimes I'd see in the chat someone would answer a question I didn't know the answer to, and I would say, oh, look, there's the answer right there. I am not so proud that I have to have all the answers. It was a wonderful learning experience for me, and Mike Jesh, who I hope you get on this program as well. He's a fantastic instructor. He was fully supportive on that, and between the two of us, we were able to do quite a bit.
I was asking about,
Mike, and also Bob Mader, who helped in the background.
I love the way they, we could talk an hour just about that, but I kind of want to give them a shout out as well. Mike, you did a great job of kind of feeding him, and you kept Brian to be able to stay focused. So great. It's one of those learning experiences, but that giving back, that's how I know those people, is because they were doing something.
Right, and Mike, we started before the Foreflight workshops. I don't know if you've seen it, but there are a lot of the venerable Garmin 430, 530s in rental aircraft and other airplanes, and people knew how to go direct. I only knew how to go direct. I'm like, next fix, go direct. Next fix, go there. But it's such a powerful machine, and I got to talking to Mike about it. I said, look, we need to
And he did
the
one,
stuff.
I think I remember seeing
We did a whole
it.
series,
Okay,
yeah.
on
So
4:30 and 5:30.
yeah, so those are all on our
Which
website.
is, I mean, that's the foundation of so much. But with,
Yeah.
not to get too far sidetracked, let's talk while we're kind of in the podcast mode here. You've done a couple of things. I know we've got the SCHIFF Show is pretty new, and then we were talking this morning over coffee. You were talking about the from cockpit to cowl and so. So, tell us. Let's hear about what the focus of that, because I believe a good bit of that is around safety.
Absolutely.
And that's a big theme here is safer skies, and so roll.
Yeah, so my good friend Jeff Simon, we became friends because I was a guest on his program, Social Flight Live, and I believe he started that also during COVID. But he has an app called Social Flight. It gets pilots together. You know, it's an awesome app. You open it up when you're at an airport, like right now, and you get more points. You're entered into the drawing, and all his sponsors have giveaways. But he had me on his program, and we became friends since then. And he'd call me and say, "Hey, I just had this flight, and I did this. Was that right?" The controller yelled at me. I said, "No, Jeff, that's not right." Here's and we'd have this conversation. Then I'd say, "And I have this airplane," and I'm like, I got this metal in my oil. Is there supposed to be metal in my oil? And so he would tell me how to handle that, and we had these conversations back and forth.
So he was the mechanic, and you were the pilot.
He's the mechanic. I'm the pilot. I'm like, these conversations we're having are golden. If somebody could be a fly on the wall listening to two of us talk, asking each other questions, that's a podcast. So that's where Cockpit to Cowl started. Cockpit for the pilot, cowl for the mechanic. And it's cockpit2cowl.com, the number 2. And you can see, that's where you sign up and register for them. And then you can watch them all on either YouTube or Social Flight. But we do that once a month on the second Tuesday of the month.
Okay. And we'll get that plugged here.
Sure.
So if people are watching this, you can pick up on that. So
and it's
good.
unscripted. We just talk to each other. We'll pick a
Right.
topic, and then we get together and talk about it. We'll ask questions. We'll look at the chat and see what people are asking, and it'll just drive a conversation. It's natural.
Two different perspectives bring in a common platform.
Yeah, and we do have entirely different perspectives from each side of
Right.
from the each side of the engine.
Right, right. And then the SCHIFF Show.
The SCHIFF Show
It
is
almost sounds like you're saying something else, but
it does, and that was a play on the last name. And you know what? Why not double down on it? Right? So
if it works, run with it.
yeah, and I thought it may really be a SCHIFF Show. We started that in January. So the Foreflight workshops, what I learned from doing that is you can produce, you can present. You shouldn't do both.
Okay, you were
So
trying to
I'm trying to do both. I'm running the video, I'm recording, I'm running the show, and I'm also presenting and teaching. And I found that you can do two things half-heartedly or one thing wholeheartedly. So I wanted to have someone produce it. And I know that as a board member of the National Association of Flight Instructors, one of the things that
Right.
my wife would tell you I'm doing too much of, but my passion is with instructing and instructors. Remind me to talk about today's instructors.
Okay, yep.
So, as a board member, I've participated in our NAFI Mentor Lives. It's a once-a-month webinar webcast, and there's a producer involved. And I really wanted to use him for doing my next project, which is the SCHIFF Show. But it's very expensive to pay someone to do that. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of equipment, a lot of time and effort. And we were very fortunate that the Avemco insurance company, who's obviously has a vested interest in safety, one crash prevented saves them way more than what they're paying to sponsor this program.
Mm-hmm.
So they're covering the expense of having it produced. So that leaves me to focus on presenting. And so that is the SCHIFF Show, and it's theschiffshow.com. theschiffshow.tv is the website. And we do that on the second Thursday of every month. And it's basically an education variety show where there's 5 segments, 5 10-minute segments of the show, roughly. They may vary a little bit. But the first is going to be an accident. We're going to look at this accident, what happened, and why. And then next, we're going to look at the FAR and AIM and procedures that are involved with, preventing that kind of accident. Then there's technique. We're going to talk about what instructors should teach or what pilots should do, techniques to avoid that accident. Then we'll have a technology section where we talk about the technology that's available now to help prevent this kind of accident. And then finally, we'll have a game show at the end where it's kind of fun quiz. You answer live. If you're watching live, you can answer it.
Okay.
And we'll eventually have prizes on those type things and maybe a competition. But it's a lot of fun. It's a new format, and special thanks to Avemco for sponsoring and making it possible, because it's a lot. It's getting a lot of safety stuff out there. We had one last night, and I had a lot of fun with it.
I know when we plan for this, safety is a big focus of yours, and,
Huge.
And it should be on everyone. But my point,
Right.
you're going out of your way again to make this happen. And I like the way you leveraged one saved incident. So you got hundreds of thousands, probably people watching you.
Yeah.
If somebody walks away with something that stops them from doing that one thing, not even
Right.
if it's someone that is Avemco's protecting, but just protecting everyone.
Right.
It's a real value added. So
Yeah.
once again, thanks for helping keep us on our game. And
I hope it's
safe.
had that effect, and I think it has.
Yeah, no, you will. You tipped me off there, but I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what keeps you going in aviation, but also I think maybe part of that's that training and their gap between. Just talked about new people that are trainers you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so we have obviously a very new cadre of instructors and a very fast revolving door, because our industry is recovering now from a stagnation period like it's never had. After we had 9/11, and then we had a time when they raised the retirement age for airline pilots. So there was, like, some people call it the lost decade, where there was just no movement at the airline. Nobody was retiring because the airlines weren't hiring. They were shrinking, contracting. And then they raised the retirement age. So there's a 5-year period where nobody had to retire. Because it was like that, people were not getting in. The student startups were dismally low. Why would I want to go do this? I can't get hired. No one's hiring.
Right.
Fast forward, now that created a pilot shortage. We just don't have enough pilots. They also raised the requirements for becoming an airline pilot or being a professional pilot. And that came in the wake of the Colgan Air accident. That I honestly don't believe that the number of hours makes you a good pilot. The experience is good. But what it did is it created a shortage of pilots.
Because you had more hours in the bank to get there.
Right. You had to have a lot more hours. You had to have an ATP to get hired as an airline pilot. So this created a bit of a hole, a demand for pilots. And so that enabled the airline pilots to demand a higher wages. And now, so the job is really appealing. We need pilots. We're paying them really well. Guess what? Student startups are going through the roof. The whole training cycle is going really fast. It was where you would spend a lot of time building time. You would spend a lot of time getting to the point where you learn and get a lot of experience. Now things are happening so fast. People are going all the way from zero to hero pretty quickly.
Okay.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just want to help make it safer and say, let's not forget about safety, because it's become a very safe industry. We're doing really well. We can do better. I just want to focus that there are 3 very important things, and in this priority order: safety, legality, and comfort. And when I have a co-pilot flying, or if I have a student, I say, you can do anything you want as long as it meets those 3 criteria. It's got to be safe, legal, and comfortable for you and the passengers. And if you can't do all 3, chip away from the bottom of that list. Mm-hmm. But always safety is at the top of that list. Now, the new instructors are just trying to build time, and we call them time builders, and they don't put their heart into teaching. It's not their fault. They're there. They know they're only got to get to the 1,500 hours or 1,200 hours, whatever they need for their operation. And they're going to the airline or going to a regional. And so back when I was teaching, there was competition for the job. You had to be good at what you did. And there was a lot more compulsion to be a very good flight instructor. Okay. And have good students and have a good success rate. And I just think that we're not seeing as much of that now. We're not seeing as much pride in the instruction coming. We have some fantastic instructors, and I don't want to dismiss the fact that there are many of them out there doing a great job. I've met some of them. But we're having a lot of instructors who just want to go use that instruction time for someone else to pay for the airplane, and they're getting to build and log the time so they get their job. And using that as a stepping stool and a tool to get there, it's compromising some of the safety. And a lot of us at the NAFI board of directors also are very concerned we had that horrible accident where a student was pre-flighting his airplane and the instructor was filming him and putting it on Instagram and shaming him, really making fun of him, talking poorly about him. They went
Wow.
up and they both got into a thunderstorm and they both died.
Oh,
And in this
oh,
video, it was all available because he was posting it while they were flying, and he's making fun of them and calling them names. And I just think I think most instructors out there would be so ashamed of that and would never do that. But Josh Flowers from Aviation 101, he wrote the best and read it online response to that I've ever seen. But I would like to encourage new instructors, if you're going to use that job to build time, do it with pride. Take pride in what you're doing.
right, right. And, I've seen a little bit of that. My journey, I was very fortunate. I had in my most recent rating, had Ed, shout out, a fellow that I think took it the way you're talking about, wanted to gain the time, but took it to the point he wanted to be a great educator, as well as use that experience to become a great aviator.
Oh, that's great. I like to see that. And there's a lot of them out there.
And so he was I've seen that, but I probably have seen a little bit where somebody say, we got to hit that mark and move on. And it's not a problem, like you said. I think you said it, not all their fault sometimes, because they're kind of, the industry is pushing probably for a little bit of that. And so that's another organization, the NAFI, that you're involved with. I think you mentioned to me, I don't know if this is through AOPA or that you do some kind of safety, accident evaluations and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. So
How does that? That's just another slice of the pie. You were telling me you stay pretty busy.
I do. I stay too busy. Like again, I said, ask my wife; she'll tell you. I do, kind of following again in my father's footsteps, because he was doing it, aviation safety consulting, and I started helping him with some of the jobs he was doing. For example, Jeppesen would make a new knee board, and they'd put all kinds of gouges on it for reminders for pilots, and they'd need a knowledgeable pilot to look at that, edit it, make sure it's all correct. Here's this, edit it, tell us it's right, and we'll pay you $500.
Right.
There'd be a flight school trying to set up a syllabus, or there would be a corporate flight department wanting to. They got 3 or 4 different airplanes, but we want to set up standard checklists and try and get things like you guys do it at the airline. Can we pay you to help us with that? So I would do this kind of consulting. It has turned into, the most work that I do now is like expert witness work in accident litigation. So an accident happens, a lawsuit results. The lawyers need someone who's an expert in piloting airplanes to testify about what should and shouldn't be, much like what you see in TV shows when the expert gets on the stand. So I've been doing a lot of that, but before I can render an opinion, I have to look at an accident through the magnifying glass and really forensically get into what happened. And I've learned a lot about that, and it was a baptism by fire. My first case was the Colgan Air accident, and that I learned a lot about that accident. I've learned a lot about what causes accidents, and this is where I get the common denominator from these accidents
To play it back.
and I want to pay it forward and say, look, all these accidents I'm seeing have this in common. Mm-hmm. And so if we can just wipe that out, we've probably wiped out a good chance of you having an accident.
Yeah, it's. I often say this on almost every conversation, that no substitute for experience, and how you pull all that together. And if you're not, you're kind of a jewel, that you've got this kind of background in how you pay it forward and how you pull it together, because it's a matter of not stopping everything, but we get a few of them, we're going to make it all better.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what I keep hearing in the theme of your approach is, we don't win them all, but we got to win some of them.
And there are a lot of people who, get their pilot's license and they don't participate in any kind of continuing education, kind of like you and I do with our driver's licenses.
Yeah.
We got our license, we get in the car and go. And it's pilots who get into, and people have heard me say this so many times, it's pilots who get into the airplane like you and I get into our cars. Those are the ones crashing. The ones watching these type podcasts and educational programs, trying to better themselves and learn more, those aren't necessarily the ones crashing airplanes. That's why Avemco was really encouraging people to participate in continuing education, as is the FAA with their Wings program. So that is something very important to, if you see someone who just is an airplane driver and doesn't educate themselves anymore or participate in continuing education, I would like to encourage fellow pilots to please get others to participate in continuing education.
I have to say that I could do better, and one of the benefits of me meeting people like yourself is I feel more engaged. I am driven to be better educated.
Good, that's good.
And
That's great.
so I'll take you helped at least one
Excellent.
work on that. So
Excellent.
and I think we all have to. I enjoy keeping up more with it, and I do think we get a little bit lazy. We get we lose that situational awareness of maybe if we're a little rusty.
And complacency.
Yeah.
You know, I've done this all this time, and I've got all this time, I've been flying this long, and nothing's ever happened.
So
that doesn't mean nothing will.
Right.
It means you've been lucky.
Right.
Right.
Right. So also, I know you were kind of switch subjects a little bit, kind of some of the things you've accomplished even outside commercial. You mentioned, was it Operation Peace Flight?
Oh, yes.
You were talking about some of the opportunities you've had through your aviation, excuse me, through your commercial, put you in a spot to do some neat things. What was that all about?
Yeah, I sort of feel like the aviation version of Forrest Gump. You know, I keep getting involved with all these neat things, and partly because, you know, hanging around my dad, and my dad organized, he just sent a letter on a whim to, I think, the King of Jordan, and he gets back a letter from the prince that says, hey, we like your idea, let's do it. And it was a flight of 35 general aviation airplanes from Jerusalem, Israel to Amman, Jordan. No airplane has ever taken off in one country and landed in the other before that. And it was a really cool thing to do, and it was called Operation Peace Flight. Google it, or you search it on YouTube. You'll see the whole story.
Operation Peace Flight?
Peace Flight, yeah, in the
okay.
Middle East. And we flew these airplanes. We landed in Jordan. We were looking at the aeronautical chart that says aircraft of Israeli register do not cross the Jordan River or you'll be shot down. And here we are. Guess what? We're crossing the Jordan River. And I'm like, you sure we have permission to do this? Yeah, we do. We landed. We were greeted by King Hussein. We were treated like royalty ourselves. And I was watching pilots of Israeli descent talking with Arab pilots like they're just the best friends. And, you know, one of them said so poignantly that last time I saw, you know, your kind, it was through the gun sight of my rifle. And now here we are talking together. So I believe that aviation brings people together. It transcends many of the differences between us. And that's what I absolutely love about it. You could go to Oshkosh like you've been. You don't see people talking politics or religion or all these differences between who and whoever. We're all got the one thing in common as aviation, and it really does. It forms a huge bond between a lot of pilots.
I hear that all the time, is that the platform for aviation is, you said it well, I agree with you. I've only had the opportunity to go to Oshkosh once, but there wasn't anybody arguing about who was the president
Right.
or this. They were talking about angle of attack and, you know, was that a good landing, or how do I become safe, or boy, I'd like to have that plane. And all, it's a brotherhood that, once again, I am seeing, and I hope that's part of the message I want to bring to those that are sharing their time with us, is this aviation business, this aviation pleasure, this aviation experience is a brotherhood, and it transcends a lot of things, and you can drop your guard a little bit and meet a lot of very interesting people and learn a lot if you let yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say brotherhood and sisterhood too. I was a judge for the Air Race Classic, which is it's for female pilots an air race around the country. Fantastic. Look it up, Air Race Classic. It's a very neat program. Something like that being advertised and getting some good press. And in fact, I hope you get some of those people who run that as guests on your program, because that will encourage a lot of girls, I think, to get into aviation as well.
That's really, really neat. I love the connectivity of all of this. Speaking of safety, I want to catch this. You've flown a lot of hours, flown in a lot of different places. Ever been in a situation that didn't go the way you wanted and what you learned from it?
Never.
Okay.
No,
Okay, good. Well, we
no.
can move on to the next question
No,
because I got to believe that not to your account, but there's got to be something that happened less than perfect in what you took away from it.
There are so many of those that absolutely, and if you don't take away from it, you're missing an opportunity. I've had emergencies, and we talked about one of them on my program last night. I've had to handle things. Nothing ever goes always as planned, and you need to be ready to change lanes. You know, if you want to drive in this lane the whole way to your destination, and then there's an accident, you're going to have to, like I said, get in a different lane. So you need to be prepared to do that. I have had a lot of, where the airplane breaks or malfunctions, and you've got to deal with that. I've had where you've got to divert, go to another city, and now you're stuck there and you don't know what's going to happen. A lot of times when something bad happens, I shouldn't say bad, when your plan is altered, that's when some of the most fun and fantastic things happen. You wind up in a city where people will help you and bend over backwards for you, and you'll learn more about that place. So I've diverted and ended up in places and learned about that city, met some fantastic people who I'm still friends with. I've had things like that happen. I mean, are you looking for specific?
Well, just I think what you're hitting on is what I like. The kind of the come out of it is be prepared. Things happen. Learn from it. Make the most of it.
Yeah.
So it's almost back to a little bit of back to learning, back to staying tuned in, trying to, but realize it. One thing as a common theme I continue here is that we love aviation. It's a serious business, and you have to prepare for it, stay ahead of it, and that stay out of those situations that don't put you on the ground safe, but when you learn from it too.
Yeah, be okay saying no.
Right.
One time I've been trying for a long time to get a good friend of mine up in my airplane. I had an Aranca Champ at the time, and this was back in St. Louis, and I finally get an opportunity to take him flying. We go out, and it's gusty, windy like this. I'm like, let's go. I can handle it. I've got this experience. I'm good in the wind. This seems like it's okay. And we're taxiing out, and a good gust of wind hit, kind of picked a wing up and put it back down, and I'm like, I'm feeling pressure to take him flying, and I'm making a bad decision here. And I told him, I said, you know what? We're going to go back. He goes, oh, thank God. He was frightened, and I'm like, but he didn't want to say anything.
Right.
But a lot of people, if you're a passenger or you're another pilot flying with somebody else, I admonish you, if you see something, say something. Don't hint and hope that everything's going to go all right. If someone else is making a decision you're uncomfortable with, say something about it. Because if he'd have said something about it right there to be like, hey, I think this is too windy, I'd be, yep, you're right, I don't want to go. But we're all trying to be brave. We all try to do the right thing.
We all do. One of the things that in my limited time and my limited hours, but I make a point of before we get off the ground, do 2 or 3 things with any passenger. 1, make them comfortable with the aircraft, so they know what we're doing. 2, I really emphasize that if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
Believe me. Won't hurt my feelings a bit
That's
if you
huge.
say.
That's huge.
I won't be upset a bit if you say, I just don't want to go anymore, whatever. And it really is something I mean to the heart, because I don't want them to feel that comfort thing you talked about, the third thing on your list.
Right.
I want them to have that, and I think we all think we're bulletproof, and we're a little scared. Maybe it's not the right word, but afeared of saying things, saying, hey, he's the pilot, he knows. In the process.
And at the airline, I do the same thing, especially with new co-pilots, because they're in a position where, hey, this guy's got all this experience, he's got this gray hair. Who am I to tell him that we shouldn't be flying in thunderstorms?
Right.
Well, I tell them, and I make them very comfortable at the beginning, that, hey, there is nothing you can say that's going to hurt my feelings. If you don't know what I'm doing or you don't know what something is, speak up, because I might not either, and I might need to hear it. And I tell them to use the appropriate level of assertiveness, and it's not going to hurt them. If you need to take the airplane or hit the brakes or do something, be assertive, do it. We'll talk about it afterwards. Your focus is safety, not preserving my feelings.
Right. And at that partnership. So I would imagine, I can only imagine what that's like when you have 2 professionals like that, and one individual says, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah,
and so that's got to be it sounds easier than it is. Easier said than done.
It's a very difficult thing to do. Pilots do not. One thing we all have in common is our personalities, and we have these traits that we generally don't talk about our emotions. And we're not going to say, hey, I'm scared to do this. No one's going to say that.
Right.
This is kind of frightening me right now. When
Exactly, yeah.
even if it is, or I'm really sad today because my dog just died, and I'm not going to fess up to that. Well, so someone did something brilliant a long time ago, and they came up with this color code system that we use at the airline, and it's awesome because pilots can talk colors, and so you've got the green, yellow, red,
Right.
and you want to stay in the green.
Okay.
Anybody who's starting to feel a little bit stressed out, overloaded, or just feeling like this operation is getting a little dangerous, getting into yellow, red is imminent danger. And so we have this color code system, and pilots don't hesitate to say, hey, I'm getting in the yellow here.
That's neat.
And it's, okay, good, let's get ourselves back in the green.
I like that.
And pilots can do that, but they will not talk about emotions.
That's neat.
Yeah.
I something so simple that it gives them a
Yeah.
kind of a platform that they can express themselves without, feeling comfortable. I'm gonna try to use that.
It works great, and I laughed at it when they first came out with it at the airline.
Seems too simple, but
Eventually, I'm like, you know what, this does work. Because pilots they're reluctant to say that this is bothering me. I'm not comfortable going with one generator at night with that storm out there.
I wanted to. We got this beautiful plane behind us, and I wanted to hear a little bit about that. I know you said you're doing some training in that. We talked about that a little bit earlier, and any other unique aircraft you've had the pleasure of flying. And I'm sure the list is long, but I'm just curious what that might be like.
Yeah, sure. I've flown, and I keep track as my dad does, and I don't know what he's up to, 400 or so now, different kinds of airplanes, and I don't think I'll ever get to where he is. I just cracked 100 different types. This is one of my favorite. That's why I bought it. It's a fun tail dragger. It's a Citabria. I learned to fly in it, so I wanted to teach my son to fly in it. I want him to learn in a tail dragger because I believe, you're a better pilot if you can manage one of these over a tricycle gear. If you can fly one of these, you can fly a tricycle gear.
Right.
If you can fly a tricycle gear, that doesn't necessarily mean you can fly one of these. And so I do a lot of tail wheel instruction in this. I just checked a guy out. A couple of people and gave him their tail wheel endorsements. Jeff Simon's building a tail dragger, and he's going to come to me, and we're going to do some work in that. By the way, lesson number one is we go to Target or Walmart, and we load up a shopping cart full of water, turn it around, push it backwards around the store.
Oh.
This is lesson one in a tail wheel.
dragger? Okay.
So if you want to know what it's like to fly or taxi a tail dragger, go push a shopping cart around the store backwards with a heavy CG in it. But so I do a lot of that kind of stuff. The airplanes that I've flown, I absolutely love flying the Boeing 727. I'm very fortunate to have done that, and one of the few who got to fly in all three seats. So I started as a flight engineer. I upgraded to co-pilot in the 727, and then I upgraded to captain in the 727 and was an instructor on that as well. So that airplane is very near and dear to my heart. I do miss a three-man cockpit crew, three-person cockpit crew.
That's long gone, isn't it, at this point?
Pretty much. I mean, on an international flight, you'll have augmented co-pilot, two
Okay.
co-pilots, but someone's going to be sleeping most of the flight. And but I really liked a three-person crew because, you could break wind and nobody knows who did it. I mean, that's the importance.
Okay,
Let's talk
I knew
about
there was the important stuff. Okay, wasn't it?
that's what counts here. I mean, when you have two pilots and you break wind, both of you know who did it.
Yeah.
Right. So
You put a
that's
third person in there, and that helps.
no, but I will say
love that.
when the what hits the fan and an emergency happens, having more people there is huge. Our industry is looking at single pilot and maybe no pilot operations right now in the future, and it really does scare me. When everything goes well, one pilot could do the job, but there are flights. I've had flights with harrowing emergencies that if I didn't have two of us there, because there's two of us, one's going to fly the airplane, one's going to handle the problem. It really wasn't that big a deal, but by one's self would be a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I did like flying that. I did get to fly the Space Shuttle Orbiter simulator when my dad wrote an article about it.
Okay.
So he's flown a lot of neat airplanes, and I've tagged along on a couple of neat things. A Sia Marchetti, that was a lot of fun to fly as well. The Learjet. I got to fly when I got furloughed from the airline. I went back to the corporate flying, charter flying, went right into Learjet captain because that's what I was kind of doing before I got hired. Well, I got to fly the 23, 24, Lear 23, 24, 25. Those were just so much. It's like flying a little private fighter.
Little go-kart.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Those were my probably favorite jets.
But
to
you
fly.
still like the prop and the the GA
Oh
stuff.
yeah. So it's a sickness. It really is. I mean, I go to work and I fly an airplane for work. I come home on my days off and I fly this airplane, and not only will I fly, but I'll record it, and then I'll watch videos of me flying this airplane at home when I'm
It's
not
kind of an
flying.
addiction, isn't
Then I
it?
got a flight simulator. I'll play with that or watch videos of other people flying airplanes. There's something wrong. Really, there's something
Wrong, but right. What you mentioned also, speaking of, when you do have that extra time, that what do you do when you're not behind the yoke or watching a video or helping other people on a podcast or sitting here with me? What do you do?
Sleep.
Okay, a little sleep.
I do like camping. We've done a lot of camping when the kids were still at home, and I didn't keep this busy when the kids were at home, and we did a lot of family stuff. I think family is very important. We spend as much time as we can, the spare time, flying to visit where our family is. And I just had a first grandchild,
Oh.
so I'm now, speaking of old fly guy. Now it's okay to look this old because I'm a grandpa.
It just as it clicks, it's a very convenient excuse.
Yeah, so I think I'll be spending more of my spare time with family now.
Yeah, because you said you had the 2 boys and 1 girl.
Yes.
And was the grandchild with which one?
My daughter had
Your
it.
daughter. Okay.
Yeah.
Are they close?
They are in Southern California, unfortunately. So
Okay.
we're either going to have to get a place there or go there a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, we are fortunate to have several ourselves, and the only downside, as my wife would say, is that they're not close.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they get to to see them, but a lot of fun, and so congratulations to you.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
enjoy it.
It is
enjoy
fun.
it. What kind of? I think you hit so much great stuff here, but any 2-part question? Any additional advice you would give to those who want to get into aviation? And with that, is there any additional sparks that just keep you super motivated about general aviation?
Sure. To those who think they might want to get into it, I would say definitely go to a local airport. Look at a map, find where your nearest airport is, and just go there, hang out. If you are sitting there, it used to be the kid sitting there with his bike looking out, the airplane's taking off and land, somebody would come by and say, hey, you want to ride? That was an old classic thing that would happen. But being there, show up to the game. And the game is at the airport. Go to an airport, just watch airplanes take off and land. Go to a flight school and just hang out there. Bring a book, read it, sit on their couch in their lobby. You are going to have people approach you and talk to you, give you opportunities. Once you get going, also there are, look up the EAA Young Eagles for young children.
Okay.
The EAA Young Eagles program is where pilots like myself or others would volunteer their time in their airplane to give kids a ride. It's like first Saturday, second Saturday of the month or whatever. Every airport has their different weekend where they do it once
Okay.
a month. And they can just get a ride in the airplane and see what it's like, and that usually will
That's the
set
spark.
the hook.
That's the spark.
That is a spark for sure. But go to the airport, try to find an EAA Young Eagles thing, go to air shows and talk to pilots. If you can get to Oshkosh, that's the mothership of air shows.
And I will have to say, being a one-timer there, looking forward to going back. But if you want to get inspired, I think it's that getting inspired to go out and find, like you said, find that discovery ride, and you talked about your dad pulling the books out for you.
Yeah.
There's a lot you can do online.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that you can start learning. Watch the Foreflight videos, all those things.
Yeah, there are a lot of
play
good
in.
YouTube videos. There's a lot of great stuff online, but I would like to caution people. There's a lot of bad stuff online too. There's a lot of people trying to just get clickbait, like, oh, an accident just happened. If I talk about that now, I get 500,000 or 1 million hits and make money off of whatever. And I want to caution people: if you see an accident that just happened, nobody could possibly know all the details enough to talk about it until an investigation occurs. And so I steer away from that. But also the aviation education videos, there are some great ones out there, a lot of great ones. And most of them are good. Some are great, just like some are not great. And there's a lot of bad advice also. So if something doesn't seem right, let your spidey senses guide you and go find another video on the same topic and see if it's the same, or find that topic in an FAA book and look it up yourself. So trust but verify when you watch these videos.
There's so many resources that you can spend a little of your own time to do just that. Watch that, check it out, and I think coming from you, that's your background. and so you do have a spidey sense, as you would say, of there is some stuff
Yeah.
that you got to watch. And I like, before I forget it, is that comment you made about don't, just because you saw something, think you know everything about the situation.
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, we've had a few accidents here that have go with our 24/7 press and our phones and everything. We get so much, and right away you hear people that wouldn't know the first thing about flying telling us what went wrong with the transponder wasn't turned on, or the ADSB wasn't this and that, and
Yeah.
all this, and it puts blame on situations that you started off by telling us here today. We're in a really a safe. Our safety is good.
The safety is great. The fatal accident numbers are down. I don't measure by fatal accidents solely. I mean, we are having a lot of accidents right now that people are surviving, could have come very close to being fatal. I would just assume we have less accidents to begin with, and most of these were very preventable, and they were just for plain stupid pilot tricks.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw our own head of the NTSB say regarding the airplane, the near miss that we had recently. She said the aircraft was told to line up and wait and hold short of the runway.
Those two things don't go together.
No,
do they?
you can do one or the other.
Yeah.
You can't do both. And so when we have our NTSB head saying something like that, it takes a lot of credibility away, unfortunately. But we have a fantastic group of investigators at the NTSB, one of whom, Greg Feith, a good friend of mine. I hope you get to interview him one day as well. He's a really neat personality as well, but very sharp on that kind of topic.
Yeah, we've had such a nice conversation today. Talk about some laughs, some serious nature of what we do, but at the end of the day, all the virtues of aviation and the fun and the opportunities are there. And I highlight that because you said it earlier, that don't just assume that you see someone else in a plane that you can't do that if you want to do it. We're in a place stuff like that can get done.
Anybody can do it.
Anybody can do it.
If
So
you put enough
if you're out
into
there,
it.
put something into it.
Absolutely.
What really keeps you inspired to keep pushing forward in aviation, general aviation? And then maybe to close up is leave us with a thought. What is Brian's words to live by, fly by, and make our experience better?
Sure. What inspires me is the people, the friends I make, the camaraderie in aviation, the surviving a flight, so I have a little bit of fear. And it's okay to have a little bit of fear to make you do the right thing, because it's going to cause you to go look at what if this happens, and be ready for that and have an alternative plan. But what really inspires me is when, people like yourself ask me to talk to me about what I'm doing, and that justifies what I'm doing. It says what you're doing is something that people are interested in, that I want to talk to you and hear your story. That inspires me. When people just write a note saying, hey, I learned a couple things from what you said last night, and I've been teaching for this many years. Thank you very much. So just those kind words inspire me. The friends that I make in aviation inspire me. And the fact that I can pay it forward with the airplane, with aviation, and take people up for rides or teach them to do something that they never thought they could do, that inspires me. Watching and having an effect on a safety record might inspire me as well. Being involved in a world of things that we see and sensations we experience that ordinary people only dream about, that inspires me. And I think pilots get that bond from all of those things that we get to see that most people don't. Who can see Tulsa and Oklahoma City at the same time? Look at both of them. Secondly, you said, what do I want to leave people with? I think my final thoughts are, and I have a t-shirt that says it says 2 speeds. And I even have the website, 2-speeds.com. I get it into almost everything that I teach. We have a choice to operate at one of 2 speeds, slow or screw up. Okay? And it's that common denominator in many of the accidents that I see is rushing to comply and being in a hurry and making mistakes as a result of that. And that's not just aviation, that's all over life.
That's life.
Take your time, enjoy the ride. Look at the taxi out, slow down, take that as a time to let your engine prove itself, to enjoy the experience. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I would say is stay inside the envelope. I always say these two things: 2 speeds and stay inside the envelope. In the envelope is formed by the regulations we have, the Aeronautical Information Manual, our airplane handbook, the insurance requirements, or a rental agreement that we might have, or if we're flying professionally, it's the policy manual. These policies and rules and everything that's limiting us is written in blood. An accident happened to cause this procedure to be there. Stay inside that, and maybe give yourself your own safety margin. So slow down, follow the rules, enjoy the ride.
What great advice. I don't think anybody out there could disagree with any of that. Enjoy the moment, take every day. Thanks for that. Thanks for those thoughts. And just want to thank you again for taking your time, sharing your vast experience, focus on safety, focus on the family, focus enjoying. I loved hearing all the stories about your dad. Thanks Barry, again for bringing us a great pilot, and you're helping him pay it forward. Thanks so much. So thank you so much for the time today.
Enjoyed it.
So also make sure, we're going to have it posted, make sure you stop and after you see the video, look for in the subtitles of the video to pick up some of the websites. Check in on the SCHIFF Show from cockpit to cowl.
Yep.
Cockpit to cowl. There are several things Brian's doing. You can't go out there, you search his name, you're going to see him all over the place, and that's why he stays pretty busy. And as always, help us here at the Old Fly Guy Network. Subscribe to the channel. Give us some feedback, like Brian talked about. Let us know what you're interested in. Some interesting aviators we could go see. We work on a network of someone who knows someone. Help us understand who we can go reach out to and tell an interesting story that brings more content to the aviation experience. That's what we're trying to do here, and help us do that. And as always, watch out for that turbulence. Look for those blue skies, and we look forward to catching up with you again on the next Old Fly Guy Conversation.